Hello, I'm Fred McNeil, and thank you for watching QACTV 7. Clint, this is part 3. I've got with a gentleman with me who I'll let him introduce himself in a second, who has more stories, has done more for our country than most families do in 10 generations. He's done it in once. Clint, thank you again for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Introduce yourself to the
Sure.
audience.
I'm Clint Williams, and this is the third iteration of my sit down with Fred. And I'll just start.
Which is a dangerous habit.
Yeah, I'll just start pretty much where we left off. So real quick, I was Sergeant First Class E7 in the U.S. Army, and I had gone to Iraq and was now at Abu Ghraib. And we got there pretty early. This was early 2004, and we were changing out with a unit was there that had some. Obviously, most people probably know some problems dealing with detainees and so forth. And so when I got there, that was just happening. And, you know, what was interesting to me was hearing about them falling in on the prison. And, you know, a lot of times...
A lot of controversy in American prisons. Make sure everyone knows what we're talking about. That we were mistreating prisoners, charges. That from the upper to the low echelon, terrible torture was taking place. So you fill us in from there.
And you know, the prison had, I think, been closed by Saddam Hussein. I don't know, not very long before the war, but hearing the stories from the people that fell in and started to, you know, live and work out of the prison, there was still a lot of scenes that were not too pretty. You know, there was.
Now, is this from Americans creating this environment, or
no? This was the Iraqis,
okay.
And so, you know, cells that were used for torture, you know, and remnants of that kind of stuff on the ground from torturing prisoners.
This was Iraqis against Iraqis. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
And so, you know, having to come in and you know, live and work out of that, it was pretty new and not really a great place to be around.
Now, did you actually work in what was
yes.
your,
yeah,
you actually worked in the prison?
So we fell in on we took over for the 205th MI Brigade, and we were Task Force 202, and we went to run operations out of there. So that included interrogations, that included counterintelligence and human intelligence, so out collecting information and so forth. So
well, let me ask you. Remember, I only know what I saw in the Washington Post. Were we torturing people? If so, and you go with where you can on this, was it? I mean, it is a war. First of all, I mean, and I apologize to the audience. Unless you've been in a war, I don't think you can understand how a war works. Now, that doesn't absolve anybody of doing crimes against other human beings. Were we doing things wrong, you think, or were we what?
Well, the evidence that they showed looks like people were doing things that they weren't supposed to do, that weren't under you know, certain rules, regulations, whether it be Geneva Convention or other policies set forth by our government.
Were they punished?
They were punished. Some of the military police, I think, is where most of the blame fell, and then of course on the leadership of that organization. But some people went to prison and so forth for doing some of those things.
I'm naive. I know nothing. I really don't in this area. If you mistreated a prisoner, I know in Vietnam I was temporary TDY assignment, and I was just an E4, very unimportant. We were sent 1 week somewhere in the Pleiku area where I was stationed, and we guarded prisoners. Now, we were told by it was an E6 or E7, like yourself. I mean, before we got near a prisoner, we were told they would get a 10 o'clock tea break with sweets, a 2 o'clock one, they'll get lunch and their dinner. You won't talk to them. Right. You won't be rude to them. You won't, you know, we got a whole list of things. And an E4 being told this by an E6 or an E7, you listen.
Right.
Did that break down, in your opinion, or just rogue individuals or rogue you?
I think both. When there's a lack of leadership, you know, people had just, like I said, come to the prison and started taking it over, and it started basically from the ground up. I think, you know, leadership not being in the area, not being as involved. We had, right before we came to take over for him, there was, that place would get rocketed and mortared all the time, and the
now,
commander
while we were managing it,
yes,
it was being rocketed.
yeah.
Okay.
So the commander of the MI brigade at the time lost his driver. I think he was a specialist or something. Got killed by a mortar, and I think that caused some
Just ticks
mental
people off.
anguish
When
and
you
stuff
lose a
like
friend,
that.
you're
Yeah,
mad.
and I don't think it was. I think it was a breakdown where those events happened and they weren't properly managing the activities that were going on. And, you know, this was Iraq. It was different than Afghanistan. You know, Afghanistan, you know, we went in there, our country had just been attacked, and now we're going into a war that I think a lot of people, you know, weren't really sure about.
Weapons
and so,
of mass destruction or
you
whatever
know,
it was. Yeah.
mentalities were a little different. But, yeah, so I think that played a big role.
Let me ask you this, Clint, and again, tell me what you can. Would you say, by and large, Americans play by the rules, Geneva Convention or whatever, when we have prisoners? I mean, I know in Vietnam, I can remember this E7. I have a good visual picture of him right now. I mean, he laid it on the line. You won't do this. You won't do that.
Yes, I think people play by the rules. You know, there's training. There has to be training. You know, that was a big portion of training that we taught and instructed before we went over there to people. But I think people are there trying to do what's right.
Okay.
You know, number one, worried about their buddies and themselves, but trying to do what's right.
Well, it hurts when you lose a guy you're in the barracks with, eating with, and all of a sudden he's dead. Right. Unfortunately, not everybody, but a small minority. It happens in a prison, Jessup or wherever. Some guards make foolish decisions and have consequences, and they should be jailed and punished. But by and large, you're saying we probably were played by the rules.
Yes, I think so.
Oh, good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
As an American, that's good to know.
Yeah. So we came in, we took over, and we had a lot of teams that would go out with different units and provide support to the Marines in Al-Anbar, and ended up supporting Fallujah, and with other units.
Fallujah, again, it reminded me, terrible door-to-door fighting.
Yeah, that was a battle by the Marines, with the Marines, initially in 2004, and then they went back in. But
terrible fighting.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible. There was a lot of things that was starting to change this last deployment to Iraq with
change for
the
the better or the worse?
The worse. The country was in pretty bad turmoil, and you know, people who were happy to see us weren't too happy for us to be there after that, and it got pretty sketchy for quite a while. They got tired of seeing
Americans after a while.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think there was a lot of influences that were involved, but it was definitely not a safe place.
For real. Okay.
Yeah, you know, and like I said, you know, there was rockets would come in, you know, and they rocketed in so prisoners would be out in a courtyard in tents that we provided for them, and their rockets would come in and killing prisoners, you know, their own people, and you know, whether they would come and fire some shots at the perimeter, you know. That kind of stuff happened. And then there happened to be a road that would come into the prison that was not a very
safe road,
very safe place to travel down, leaving the prison.
So the prison itself, not only was there a prison there, but it became a combat zone of the bad guys.
Right.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
And I think the year after I left, they had a whole company-sized assault on the prison from insurgents. Yeah.
Now, again, help me as an American, again, just reading the paper. So who are these guys? I mean, that sounds stupid. I mean, are we talking Saddam Hussein's? Who are Iranian spies? Who is causing this turmoil at this point?
So I think it was a combination. There was Shia militia that were doing certain things, but then there was also, you know, we created a large problem when we basically fired the whole Iraqi army. Okay. So we had people that, you know, were told to serve their country and might not have done anything wrong, and now they're out of a job, and the Americans are to blame, and now they don't have any money.
So they turned against the Americans.
And yeah, I think that played a large role in it, and I don't think, you know, that was pretty tough.
Oh, I bet it was. I mean, were they being bankrolled by the Iranians, or we don't know, or Saudis, or who?
Well, there was Al-Qaeda in Iraq at the time, and then there was the Shia component too. So we did find out that Iran and Hezbollah was providing support to the Shia militias, and they introduced a technology that they had used in other places like Lebanon, and which was called an explosively formed projectile, which was basically a shaped charge which had a copper lining to it, and so when that would go off, the copper would become liquefied almost, and it would just pierce right through armor, and it was pretty bad.
Now,
and
these
so,
were done through rockets, or these landmines, or
they were IEDs,
okay.
and so they would pierce right through the armor of vehicles and so forth. So it was a pretty bad time.
It wasn't too pleasant, was it?
No, no.
What was it, Clint? Most people, again, when I was in Vietnam, you had 12 months. When I was in Korea, I think it was 13. I forget what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But you knew, you get short time sticks and all this stuff. How about?
Well, I mean, you did your job,
Okay.
and and I use this term like your head is on a swivel. You're always alert. You're always.
You're nervous.
Right. So then when you process back into society, when you come home, it's kind of hard to turn some of that stuff off.
I'm sure it is. Terrible.
Because you're always at a higher level.
Were you there? Was it a 1 year? Did you
It was
know
a one. It was a 1
okay.
year. I didn't end up staying the whole time.
Okay.
Which was okay with me. It was,
I bet so.
and then after that, I had gone to Afghanistan.
After?
Yes.
Oh.
And so my unit, like I said, we did counterintelligence and so forth. So we went to stand up a detachment for, I guess you could call it strategic counterintelligence, more to work at a higher level than the tactical level. So
Now explain that again to the layman. Is this in an office or out in the field?
So there were different FOBs and so forth. Some of the large areas were Bagram. There was a large NATO contingency in Kabul. And so that entity was set up in Kabul in order to be able to coordinate with the embassy and other people like that. So that was
you
where
get
that
all
was.
types of intel.
Yeah.
Intelligence.
So real quick, it was, I think I might have told you this before, I had flown into Bagram and I had gotten off the airplane on the tarmac and I needed to go to the bathroom. And I was told, don't walk over there, you'll blow yourself up. So, there's still mines and stuff laying around outside. Yeah, outside the strip and stuff like that. So yeah.
Now I'm skipping to Afghanistan. If you want to kick back again. Generally, yes, a GI. Fred, what was it like Korea? It was a 9-to-5 job, except you had to wear a uniform all the time. What was Vietnam? That was a 24/7 job, different type. Afghanistan.
Well, so I think, when you're deployed, you're always working. You don't really have too much else to do. You go to the chow hall and grab some food if you can, and people are working shift work too, working at night. So it's a 24-hour. You're always doing something.
And I didn't realize the war's in. Was Afghanistan better duty than Iraq?
So at the time that I was in Afghanistan, it was not like Iraq, and it was, but that changed. So, like we would drive from Bagram to Kabul and just have a couple vehicle convoy with, a couple weapons. And at that time, we didn't have a crew serve weapon at the time. But I mean, there was still quite a bit of threat, but it just was, it was, the feeling was different than being in Iraq.
Okay, let me again jump back. People always ask me, Fred, compare the Vietnamese and the Koreans. They were all good to Americans, by and large. How about the Afghans versus Iraqis, or no?
I can't really. They're different people. That area is very tribal in nature.
Right.
We put a lot of trust in people to provide us support and to work with them and so forth in both areas. We would hire local nationals. So basically, people that wanted to who could speak English and could pass a basic test to come and provide language support or translation support to us while we were out interacting with other people.
They'd help you read documents and
or go out and do your mission, because you need a native speaker to be able to translate for you. So, and these people are risking their lives to leave their home, come to the FOB, put their family and their lives at risk for providing support to the United States. And, unfortunately, Sometimes it didn't turn out very good for them. You know, sometimes they had to flee the country with their family, or you know, they were executed and stuff like that. So there was, you know, very risky. But
could you go to an Iranian or Afghanistan restaurant? I mean, that might sound stupid, but could you eat some local? Could you get some local flavor either in the mouth or just the movies?
So
or
most
anything?
of the time you couldn't really, you know, leave the installation. You know, if for some reason, you know, you might be in a position where you could, but it was not frowned upon. You know, it was pretty risky to be out in.
It was dangerous,
in
just plain
areas.
dangerous.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Okay.
But, yeah, but overall, you know, they were really. It was not really a great place to be.
Okay.
You know, but it was a great place to have experience in my life.
Just
you
the
know?
whole experience of both countries.
Right. And in Iraq, we ended up, you know, we had rockets come in. Some people were wounded. We had another soldier that was killed by an IED. So her name was Carrie Gazowitz. She was a sergeant. And so, you know, it's real.
It's war.
You know?
It's war.
Yeah, it's real.
It's crazy.
It's real. So.
Afghanistan also a year?
Pardon me?
A year?
No,
deployment?
just a short period of time.
Oh, shorter period of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now, do you want to spend more time in Afghanistan or Iraq, or you want to move on?
No, we can move on.
Go ahead. We'll go from there. Go.
So I had reached my time in the military where I could either re-enlist or
And you're in
go a different
E7,
route.
so
E7.
you're a good NCO position.
Yeah, it was good. I had about 10 years active duty and another almost 5 from the National Guard. So I was total, if I would have transitioned to the National Guard or the Reserves, I wouldn't have had too much longer to reach 20 years. But as I was going through that process, I was told that if I did go in the Reserves, that I would be called right back to go to Iraq.
Oh, really? Because
So-
you were needed MOS.
Yeah,
They
and
needed you.
yes, exactly. And this was a time where the surge was going to happen. You know, people were staying there for 15 months, and I decided that
Tough
it would
time.
probably be better
Get out.
to just
Get out.
cut ties.
Strain
and
on
go and do something
family,
else.
strain on your own self, right?
Right, exactly. So, you know, I think I'd said this earlier that, you know, I found myself in a real good position from being in the organization that I was in because of our focus for so many years on the Middle East and the time that I had spent over there. It was very easy to go in and do other work.
Do a civilian type
Yes,
job,
exactly.
contract.
Yes. Doing the same sort of stuff. So I had moved on to Central Command in Tampa, and then I went to Special Operations Command also in Tampa, and spent about 4 or 5 years down there.
Now, again, clarify for everybody out there. That's the brains, you tell me, of our efforts, yes or no?
Yeah, so we have combatant commanders, geographical combatant commanders is what they're called, that cover different areas of the globe. So the Central Command commander is a 4-star general, and he or whoever they appoint. And so that's his area of responsibility.
Okay.
But, you know, it's high level. It's you know, managing strategic
This is serious stuff.
Stuff like that.
Serious
Yeah.
management of our soldiers. Right?
Yeah, you know, and it was very interesting to transition because, you know, being a soldier, being an E7, you know, you have all these other people that are, you know, much more engaged and smarter and, you know, sometimes don't really care what you have to say. But I found myself in positions when I moved on that, you know, I'm providing information and recommendations to the 4-star, and they're listening to these
Your boots
things.
were on the ground. They had to listen to you, right? I would think.
Yeah,
I hope.
it was a very interesting transition to move from more of a tactical operational level to
Let me ask you this.
level like
Most of us out when I was in Vietnam, in the field, we always used to laugh. They don't, the Pentagon,
Right.
they have no idea what's going on. Did you find, having been in the combat zone itself, going to the operations, or I call the brains of they knew it, were they in touch with what
Yeah,
was
it
going
helped.
on?
You know, you could reflect on experiences and things that went on at the
But
ground
they
level and
listened to you,
apply
as
it.
I like.
Yeah, you know, they listened to what I had to
Good,
say,
good.
which was nice. You
Yes,
know,
it was.
which I don't think ever would have happened to me if I would have still been in the military to be able to provide that type of.
Now, you were a civilian
support.
when you were there.
Yes.
Now, is it contractual, or are you actually a
So
government employee?
I was initially a contractor,
Okay.
working for a private company, and then I had an opportunity to become a U.S. government civilian.
Employee.
Yes, in 2009 to go to Italy.
Oh, wow.
So I took a position in Italy, and they were just standing up U.S. Africa Command, which covered the continent of Africa. And then when they do that, they have different service components, which Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and so forth, that provide support to that combatant commander. And so I went to work for the Army component for Africa, which was U.S. Army Africa, or CTAF.
And you're a government employee at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm living in Vicenza, Italy. And
Doesn't sound like a hardship tour to me. You tell me.
Living wasn't too bad. A lot of the traveling, when you traveled down to Africa, that took a lot out of you. But
you actually went to the continent Africa.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time throughout Africa during my time there. Yeah.
So, how many countries have you been in? Would you take a guess?
I can't. I have
over
no idea.
50, probably.
Probably close up there, but not that many.
In Italy, we have the brains of what we're doing in Africa.
For the Army.
Yes. Just for the Army. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, how was that trend? I mean, did we know what was going on, or?
Well, it was pretty new. When you're starting from scratch, you don't have a lot of forces yet that are providing support. So I worked in the I ran the counterintelligence branch, and also provided support to. It was called the G2X, which handled human intelligence and counterintelligence. And so, it was a G staff because we worked for a 2-star general. So okay. General staff.
General staff.
And so I worked there, but a lot of the work that had to be done obviously was in Africa, and we didn't really have a lot of people to do it. So we had to go out and do a lot of that work, do coordination.
Let me go back, just because again I know nothing. How does the relationship, now you tell me, because you've seen it all, you're an E7, you're a contractual worker, you're a federal government worker, all under the umbrella of intelligence. Mm-hmm. Does that work? I mean, does it work that we have 4-star generals having to listen to the civilians, contractual,
definitely.
It all works.
People have experience, and they provide, recommendations based off of their experience and knowledge. So. Okay. Especially at that time, you were getting a lot of people that had been and done a lot of things.
Experiences.
And a lot of times people will serve and then retire and then go into that line of work after they've retired. And so
it's like a teacher double dipping. You teach in Queen Anne's County and then get over Anne Arundel.
But you get a lot of great knowledge and experience, from these guys. Instead of being just put out in the pasture, and they can still continue to provide
something to contribute.
Exactly.
And they can help train the young ones how to do it.
Right, because a lot of times in the military, you reach the amount of time you can be in, or based off the rank you're at or whatever, and then it's time to go.
You're done. Get out.
But you might feel that you still have a lot that you can provide, which is pretty key, I think.
Let me ask you, having been you're an E7, you're a contractual worker, you're a GS something. Mm-hmm. If you had your choice, is one better than the other? I mean, less hassle when you're in a contractual.
Well, when you're a civilian, you don't have to deal with a lot of the
Army
military stuff that's going on. You get to do your job, but there's something to say about serving in the military and being a soldier and stuff like that.
As a contractual civilian person, I think I already know the answer, but I got to ask it. Are you put into positions of danger and life-threatening?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, so, we have huge amounts of contractors that work overseas and provide, whether it be food, living. In Iraq, we had large amounts of our logistics were handled by contractors who were hired to, put their lives on the risk, lives on the line to, transport
food out to the troops.
Exactly, food, equipment, ammunition, all these things, because our military was, not the size that had all of that.
We only have a minute or two, but I got to ask you this, and we're gonna wear the station out where you are. But we were with a gentleman earlier today who said he didn't think our military is prepared to handle what it's being asked to do because of what you kind of mentioned. We had to get contractual help. We had to get GS help. You want to react to that or not?
Well, I think, a lot of the experience that have been on the ground is left the military. I'm not saying we don't have good people, but I think that we're not in from my perspective,
Yeah.
that, you know, we
It's our
probably aren't
opinions,
in the best shape that we could be militarily.
Do you think we're stretched too thin or no?
No, I don't
No.
think we're stretched too thin. I think we
Okay.
don't have, the mentality isn't there, and a lot of the people that, you know, you probably know this, you know, the military looks at people, when I was in the infantry, you know, oh, that's a good field soldier, that's a good, you
Yeah.
know, and then that's a good garrison soldier. So, you know, and a lot of times the field soldier, the combat soldier, gets a bad rap because they're not really as concerned about a lot of this other stuff.
Paperwork and stuff like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
you know, making sure their uniforms are squared away or something. And so a lot of those people are like, well, why am I going to want to sit back here and deal with this garbage?
Yeah.
So they go on and do other
They get
things
out
and,
and move on.
and do great things. And so I think that's kind of has a lot to do with where we might be
Clint, I
today.
apologize. Look at time fly. This is crazy, isn't it? We still haven't even got to but we'll get to it in the future, okay? First of all, thank you. I said it at a group we were with today. You got to write a book. You got to write a book.
I think there's
I don't think you can make this stuff up.
no, there's so many people that have done so many great things, you know, that I don't think anything that I've done is better than anybody else.
Well, I think, and I hope that's what this show is doing. We have to remind people. You started the group we were with today. There's a group of about 15 veterans. Some of them were in combat situations. Some of them in positions you can't even explain to anybody, or you can't even talk about because they're so bizarre and strange. Somebody has to do it. They're young men and women. We just lost 2 Navy SEALs. We just lost people with a suicide drone. Every single day are putting their lives on the line, like you did and like other people did. And we got to remind people. You get to go to sleep at night. You get to go to the mall during the day because people were doing that particular job. It's not right wing, left wing. It's just who we are and what we're doing.
Right.
Good. Well, Clint, as usual, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
okay? And I promise you we won't go to 10 shows, okay?
All right.
I'm Fred McNeil. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for serving. We bring on veterans every week. My time's up. Thank you for your time. We're going to see you next time. And thank you for serving to all the veterans.